My name is Margaret Collins. I'm 63 years old, a retired school teacher, and I've been a widow for almost 8 years. I live alone now in a small house filled with memories, the kind that sneak up on you when you're washing dishes or folding laundry. After my husband passed, I poured my time into caring for our son, Jason. He was always a gentle boy, smart but easily influenced, and I did my best to raise him with kindness and stability. When he married Emily 5 years ago, I welcomed her with open arms and tried to make her feel like family, even when the connection didn't come easily. I gave them everything I could: a down payment on their first home, help with bills during the rough years. I painted their nursery with my own hands when their daughter was born. I never saw it as a burden. It was what family did. It was what I did, because I loved them. A few weeks ago, I woke up to a text from Jason. It was short, simple. Emily thinks it's better if the cruise is just family this year. I read the words 3 times, thinking maybe I misunderstood. My hands felt cold, even though it was summer. My coffee sat untouched on the counter as I stared at the message. Just family. That phrase rang in my head like a bell. I had booked that cruise a year ago, paid for the tickets, chose the itinerary. Jason and Emily were supposed to take their little one and make memories. We were all going together. Or so I thought. I typed back one word. Okay. Then I put the phone down and sat in silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that presses on your chest and makes your throat tight. I thought about all the birthdays I had remembered, the hospital visits, the countless little moments when I had shown up without being asked. I thought I was building a bond. I was building a bridge. But maybe they were walking away from it the whole time. That morning, something shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just felt the quiet weight of a door slowly closing, and this time, I wasn't the one pulling it shut. I've always believed in showing love through action. When Jason was little, I made all his Halloween costumes by hand, sewed patches on his jeans, and left notes in his lunchbox with little drawings. After his father passed, I felt a deeper need to protect him, to shield him from the hard edges of life. So when Jason graduated from college with a pile of student loans, I paid them off without a second thought. I remember the relief on his face, the thank you hug that felt like everything I had hoped for. But hugs don't last as long as interest payments, and after that, the calls slowed down again. When Jason and Emily got engaged, they wanted a small wedding, something elegant but simple. I offered to help, then somehow ended up covering the whole thing. Emily found a dress she loved but couldn't afford, so I made it her gift. I watched her twirl in it during the fitting and thought maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something deeper between us. They bought their first home 2 years later. I used nearly all my retirement savings to help with the down payment. I even insisted on helping decorate. I painted the master bedroom soft gray because Emily said it felt calming. I ordered curtains online, installed them myself while they were at work, then stocked the kitchen with their favorite snacks. I didn't want to be thanked. I just wanted to feel included. During their housewarming party, Emily held my hands and told me I'd always have a room there. I smiled and nodded like it meant the world, because at the time, it did. But now, looking back, I can't remember the last time I was invited over without bringing something or fixing something. There were so many small things. I took care of their dog when they traveled, paid for their daughter's preschool tuition 1 year when Jason said work was slow, sent groceries through delivery apps when Emily was sick. I convinced myself each act was part of building trust, part of earning my place in their life. But love shouldn't be a transaction. It took me a long time to admit that I had been measuring my worth through usefulness. If I wasn't paying, doing, helping, was I still wanted? I used to feel proud of how much I gave. Now I'm not sure if I gave too much or if they just learned to expect it. Maybe both. Somewhere along the way, being needed started to feel like being used. That realization doesn't come all at once. It creeps in during quiet moments. Like when I sat in their living room alone after repainting the hallway and noticed a family photo without me in it. Or when I asked if I could stop by and Emily said they had plans, her voice tight but polite. I never asked for anything in return, but deep down I hoped that my love would create space for me. That showing up would be enough. That effort would mean connection. Now, I see things more clearly. I was generous, but I was also afraid. Afraid of being left behind. Afraid that if I didn't make myself essential, I'd be forgotten. And the cruelest part is, I still wonder if that fear is what made it come true. They never asked me to give all I did, but they never stopped me either. And after a while, Silence starts to sound like permission. The signs had been there for a while. I just didn't want to see them. It was easier to believe they were busy, that the silence was temporary, not permanent. Jason stopped calling me back right away. Sometimes it would take days, sometimes not at all. Emily would text instead, quick notes that felt more like updates than conversations. I tried not to take it personally. They had a young child, demanding jobs, a full life. That's what I told myself every time they said they couldn't make it to dinner or forgot my birthday. The last Thanksgiving, I offered to cook and bring everything over. Emily said they were thinking of keeping it simple that year, just the three of them. Jason didn't call me himself. I spent the holiday with a frozen meal and a movie I'd already seen. Still, I told myself it wasn't about me. I reminded myself they were young, building their own family, finding their rhythm. I didn't want to believe I'd been quietly pushed to the side. Then one Saturday morning, my oldest friend Linda stopped by. She brought muffins, just like she used to when our kids were small. We sat at my kitchen table, the sun warming the floor, and I tried to make light conversation, but she saw through it. She asked how Jason was. I hesitated. I said they were fine, just busy. Her eyes softened. Then she said something I wasn't ready for. "You've made yourself so helpful, you've disappeared." The words hit like a stone in water. They sank slow, but deep. I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out. She didn't press, just held my hand and said she loved me too much to pretend anymore. That maybe I had been loving them with everything I had, but at some point, they stopped loving me back in the same way. I went quiet. Not angry, just stunned, because part of me already knew. I had felt it, but didn't want to name it. That night I lay in bed thinking about every unanswered message, every missed milestone, every time I dropped something for them, and they didn't even say thank you. I thought about the way Emily called only when she needed something. How Jason always sounded tired, distracted, like my voice was background noise. I realized I had spent years trying to stay close by being useful. If I wasn't cooking, paying, fixing, what was I? I thought usefulness meant connection. But now it just felt like a trap. Linda's honesty hurt, but it also peeled something open, like pulling back a curtain I hadn't realized was blocking the view. The light came in, and it stung, but it was still light. I started to wonder who I was when I wasn't someone else's helper. I started to ask myself questions I hadn't dared ask before, and the answers weren't comforting, but they were real. The truth was, I had been left out long before that cruise message arrived. I had just chosen not to see it, until now. It started with a feeling. One of those whispers in the back of your mind that won't quiet down. I couldn't sleep that night after Linda left, so I made a cup of tea and opened my laptop, not sure what I was looking for, only that something wasn't sitting right. Everything seemed fine at first. The balances in my checking and savings accounts looked like what I expected. Bills paid, nothing alarming. But I kept staring, scrolling through the transaction history like I was trying to read between the lines. That's when I saw it. A payment labeled property maintenance. Only, I hadn't requested any repairs. Then another one, emergency fund transfer. I paused. The amounts were small, not enough to raise red flags, just enough to be forgettable. I started clicking deeper. The transactions went back months. Some went into an account I didn't recognize. The name on it wasn't mine. It was listed as a joint account with someone else. My hand hovered over the mouse. I clicked. Emily Collins. Her name was on the account. I sat still, the glow of the screen washing over me in silence. I clicked back and found more. More transfers. More withdrawals. Labeled with tidy words like household support or recurring utilities. But I lived alone. There were no household expenses other than my own. I remembered how Emily once offered to help me with online banking. She said it would make things easier, that I didn't need to worry about it anymore. I had trusted her. I had trusted my son. I opened the bank's user management page. That's when I saw it. Emily had been added as an authorized user on several accounts. Not just view access. Full control. Somehow, she had positioned herself to make decisions, transfer funds, manage my money without me ever seeing a single alert. I tried to breathe. It felt like the air in the room had thinned. I wasn't just being excluded. I was being erased. Quietly, smoothly. While I was busy sewing curtains and dropping off groceries. I downloaded every statement, opened a spreadsheet and started tracking it. Date, amount, description, destination. I printed what I could and saved the rest on a flash drive. I moved with slow precision, like I was handling something fragile and dangerous at the same time. The hurt was sharp, but it didn't make me cry. It made me cold, focused. I thought of every time Emily smiled and thanked me for being so thoughtful. Every time Jason shrugged when I asked why things felt distant. Maybe he didn't know. Or maybe he knew just enough and chose not to ask questions. I didn't have answers yet. But I had proof that something wasn't right, and now I had a reason to stop pretending. No more explaining it away. No more making excuses for people who had quietly carved me out of my own life. I looked around the kitchen, the same one I had painted myself 3 summers ago. The chairs I refinished, the photos on the wall, everything in this house had my fingerprints on it. But suddenly, it all felt borrowed, like I had been living in someone else's version of love. I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like someone waking up. I felt a kind of stillness I hadn't known in years. Not the stillness of being left out, but the stillness right before a decision is made. That night, I zipped up the flash drive and set it next to my keys. I turned off the light and went to bed. Not to sleep, but to plan. Because I wasn't going to be stolen from in silence. Not anymore. The morning air was still when I parked outside Mr. Reynolds' office. I sat in the car for a minute, collecting my thoughts, then grabbed the folder I had put together the night before. My heels clicked against the tile as I walked down the hallway, steady and quiet, like I'd walked it 100 times before. Mr. Reynolds had been my attorney since Robert passed. He helped me settle the estate, draft my will, and walked me through all the documents I didn't understand at the time. I trusted him, not because he was warm, but because he was precise. He looked up as I entered, gave a small smile, and gestured for me to sit. I didn't smile back. I placed the folder on the table between us and said what I had practiced all night. I want to reverse the house transfer. I want to lock down every account and cancel every power of attorney. All of it. Effective immediately. He paused, not out of surprise, but out of respect. Then he nodded slowly, opened the folder, and started reviewing what I had brought. I watched his expression change as he flipped through the spreadsheets, the printouts of bank statements, the access logs. When he finally looked up, his voice was even but deliberate. "This is serious, Margaret, and you're absolutely right to act now." I nodded. "I'm not just trying to stop them. I'm reclaiming something. I've spent too long apologizing for surviving. I'm done doing that." He leaned back, fingertips pressed together, thinking, "We can file to reverse the deed. It may take a few weeks. The powers of attorney, those can be revoked right away. The account lockdown too. But if you suspect there's been abuse, we'll need to go deeper." Then he asked if I'd be open to hiring a private investigator. Someone he trusted, discreet, experienced in financial fraud and family disputes. I didn't hesitate. "Yes, hire them. I'll pay whatever it costs." He gave a short nod, then made a few notes. "This could cause some tension," he said, almost gently. I met his eyes. They already caused the tension. I was just the last one to admit it. The room went quiet, but it didn't feel heavy. It felt focused. Like I had finally stepped into my own power after years of giving it away in small pieces. Mr. Reynolds explained the next steps. He would file the necessary documents that afternoon. The deed reversal paperwork had already been prepared, since we had discussed the house transfer months ago. He would start the asset freeze and notify the banks. As for the investigator, he'd reach out and get them started that day. He asked if I had any passwords or access issues he needed help with. I handed him another sheet I had typed out. I spent the last 2 hours resetting everything. I'm not letting them log in while I sleep. He smiled slightly at that, just a flicker of approval. Then his face turned serious again. "Margaret, this might get messy. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the quiet holidays, the canceled plans, the way Emily handed me grocery receipts like they were invoices. I looked at him and said something I hadn't fully believed until that moment. "I am." When I left his office, the sky had clouded over, but I felt more grounded than I had in years. The weight wasn't gone, but it had shifted. It wasn't sadness, it was movement, forward. I wasn't acting out of anger. I wasn't chasing revenge. I was drawing a boundary for the first time in my life and daring them to step over it. And if they did, I was finally ready. It was early morning when I saw it. A white envelope, thin and quiet, slid halfway under my front door. I hadn't heard a knock, no doorbell, just the soft scrape of paper against wood. I bent to pick it up. The handwriting on the sticky note taped to the front was unmistakable. Emily's looping cursive, too polished to be casual. It said, "Just sign when you're ready, Mom. It'll make everything easier." I didn't open it right away. I stood in the hallway holding it like something alive. I could feel the heat rising under my skin, not from panic but from something sharper, colder. I already knew it wasn't a friendly gesture. At the kitchen table, I peeled back the flap and slid out the papers. Clean formatting. Crisp edges. No coffee stains, no sticky notes, no scribbled reminders. These weren't casual forms. These had been prepared by a lawyer, likely not their first draft. At first glance, it looked like standard estate updates. Language about simplification, family oversight, long-term care. I kept reading. Halfway through the second page, the words began to shift. Permanent. Irrevocable. Full legal control over all financial assets, property, and medical decisions. My hands didn't shake. My breath stayed even. I reached the final page, and there it was. The signature line, already filled out on their end. All that was missing was mine. If I had signed, they could have drained every account, sold my home, and admitted me into a care facility without so much as a phone call. Not when I was sick, while I was still standing. While I was still cooking my own meals and walking to the market and remembering every detail of my life. They weren't planning for the future. They were positioning themselves to take everything now, not as inheritance, as control, as ownership of my life. I stared at the final paragraph until the words blurred. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even rip the paper. I slid it all neatly back into the envelope, folded it once, and walked to my desk. I pulled out a labeled folder and added it to the growing collection. Evidence. That's what it was now. Not a mistake. Not a misunderstanding. It was a paper trail leading straight to the truth. In the quiet of my kitchen, I spoke to no one in particular. Maybe to myself. Maybe to the woman I had been just months ago. You almost signed this. Almost. But not today. Today, I saw it for what it was. A test of whether I was still the same woman who handed over keys and nodded along with every request. But I wasn't her anymore. That version of me had vanished the moment I saw Emily's name on my bank records. I looked around the room. The place was the same, but the woman standing in it was not. I had spent years thinking love meant saying yes. Now I understood that real love sometimes means saying nothing. Just quietly refusing to be taken. I slid the envelope into a drawer and locked it. The sound of the latch settling clicked like punctuation, like a period at the end of a sentence I had been afraid to finish. I made tea and sat by the window. The sky was still gray, but I wasn't waiting for sunlight. I had clarity now. And clarity doesn't need light to see. I parked a block away, early enough that no one would notice me. The morning was warm, too bright for what was about to happen. I waited across the street, hands still, breath steady, watching as the tan SUV rolled into the driveway I once paid for. Jason got out first, stretching from the long drive. He looked relaxed, a little sunburned, phone already in hand, scrolling. Emily followed, barking directions about luggage and checking something off a printed list. Her voice cut through the air like it always had, sharp and sure. They didn't see it right away. The moving truck in the driveway. The unfamiliar car parked at the curb. The couple laughing on the porch with a realtor. Boxes stacked by the front door. Keys exchanging hands. Jason stopped mid-step, his phone lowering as his eyes tried to make sense of it. Emily froze. Her body tensed before her voice even caught up. Who are these people? What's going on? Jason turned in a slow circle, like someone realizing the stage has changed without warning. Then he saw me, standing by the stop sign, waiting. He looked confused. Mom. His voice cracked a little, uncertain, like it used to when he was a boy and didn't understand what just happened. I crossed the street slowly, careful not to rush. I met their eyes, both of them blinking like they were waking up from a dream. You won't have to manage anything for me anymore. Emily stepped forward, voice sharp. What does that mean? This is our house. Number, I said it quietly but clearly. Not anymore. Jason looked at me, panic rising. Mom, what did you do? I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Simple, white, unmarked. I handed it to him. Inside were the house reversal documents, the financial audits, the account closures, and the updated legal protections. He opened it with trembling fingers, flipping through each page like he didn't recognize any of it. Emily snatched the folder from him, scanning it faster, her mouth opening but no sound coming out at first. This won't hold, she finally spoke. We were helping you. You'll regret this. I looked her in the eye. You mean draining my accounts while smiling in my face? Signing documents I never saw? planning to control everything I have while I was still alive. Jason stepped closer. We didn't mean. I raised my hand. Number, you didn't mean to get caught. The words landed in the silence like stone in water. Deep. Final. I let it hang there. Emily shook her head. This is cruel. We've already filed refinancing paperwork. This is illegal. I pulled out a second folder. Smaller, but heavier. Inside were every transfer record, every unauthorized login, the envelope she slipped under my door, and a statement from Mr. Reynolds documenting it all. If you take me to court, this becomes public. Every detail. Jason turned pale. Emily looked stunned, her hands shaking now. For a moment, no one spoke. The couple on the porch looked over, then turned back to the realtor. I looked at Jason, really looked at him, the boy I raised, the man I didn't recognize anymore. I was your mother. You made me your target. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. His eyes dropped to the pavement. I didn't wait for another word. I turned and walked away. Not fast, not slow, just done. I heard nothing behind me. No shouting, no pleading. Just the quiet thud of their world shifting, the sound of consequences arriving right on time. When I reached my car, I sat for a moment, watching as the movers carried a box labeled kitchen through the front door, the door that no longer belonged to them. I didn't feel joy. Not exactly. But I felt something better. I felt finished. Closure doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes, it walks quietly across the street, hands someone a folder, and leaves. That was enough for me. The apartment is small, but it's mine. The walls are bare for now, except for a painting I found at a flea market. Soft colors, a quiet landscape, something about it feels like breathing. There's no marble counters or curated furniture, just a round table by the window and a second-hand couch that creaks when I sit. But in this space, I hear my own thoughts. I feel the stillness in a good way. Unpacking was easier than I expected. I brought only what I needed, and even less of what I thought I couldn't live without. I didn't take the curtains I sewed or the set of dishes Emily loved. I left behind more than objects. I left behind the version of myself that thought love had to be earned by giving everything away. That woman stayed in the house. The one who walked out carries only what matters. Jason sent a message 2 nights after the move. It was long and full of guilt. He said he was sorry for how things turned out. That Emily meant well. That he missed me. I read it once, then turned the phone face down on the counter. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel much at all. Just a kind of quiet that told me I had already moved on. Sometimes freedom doesn't look like a big change. It looks like making tea in your own kitchen without feeling watched. It sounds like silence without pressure. It feels like walking into a room and not asking permission to exist there. I sit by the window most mornings now. Watch the people on the sidewalk, the trees shaking off their summer heat. I don't miss the house. I don't miss the noise. What I have now is small, but it is honest. It's peaceful. And after everything, peace is more than enough. What I've learned is that love without boundaries becomes a burden, and giving without being seen only leads to being used. I spent years trying to prove my worth by staying useful, but real freedom came when I stopped asking for permission to matter. If you've ever felt invisible or had to reclaim your peace, you're not alone. Share this if it spoke to you, and leave a comment if you've taken that brave step too. Your voice matters, your story matters, and sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply stop explaining yourself and start living for you.